friends. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Pastor's Chat. I'm happy to be here with you. Sorry, I feel like I'm chasing a train today. My normal schedule for Wednesday is not following my plan, which leads us right into where we've been with how life is and the things that you can change and the things that you can't, and the stress and the tension that's generated when what you want to have happen doesn't happen, what you believe you've worked hard to have happen doesn't happen, and then you have to, what do they say, make your plan, work your plan, then readjust your plan. So anyway, I'm here. It's not 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just about 8 minutes after. Welcome to the Pastor's Chat. And if you've been listening in, you know that in this season of Lent, the first thing I'm going to do for this week is to reflect on, call them spiritual disciplines, the need for human beings to structure relationships. Let me see if I can illustrate from the way I was thinking about this. In my family growing up, it was chaotic. There were 7 children and 2 adults, and small house. It was chaotic. There was just, my mother brought structure to the house. She brought a lot of structure to the house. She brought structure around some of the things I can remember. On Sundays, of course, we were structured a lot by my dad was a pastor, and so Sunday was a very ordered day. And my mom would put a roast in the oven. There was a timer on the oven so that it would start cooking, so that the roast would be done just right. So she would have mashed potatoes and roast and some vegetables, and that was the main meal for the day on Sundays. And that's how you knew it was Sunday. It was a big meal. Everybody was at the table, and my mom provided that structure. And the next part of the structure was, then there shall be quiet in the house, and there shall be nap taking for people of all ages, because it's Sunday. So Sunday afternoon was a moratorium. It was structured. And I'll get to the point of why I'm talking about this. That other structures that occurred to me was that in my mom's house, in order to make her life sane, we wore the same clothes 2 days in a row. What you wore to school on Monday, you wore also on Tuesday. And boy, nowadays, you know, if anybody caught on to that in school nowadays, you'd be like laughed out of the school. But I don't know whether people laughed at us or not. That was the deal. So structure made the relationships work. That's the point. And there were some great fun structures. My mother believed that a family needed recreational time together. And so I remember on Thursday afternoons, my father worked also at a part-time job for a while and then became full-time as a clerk in the grocery store in order to supplement the income from a pastor in a tiny church. But on Thursdays, he would work his schedule so that he had off Thursday afternoons. And so on Thursday afternoon, my mom would get ready, a picnic lunch would be packed, and we would go as a family, when the weather provided, we would go fishing on Thursday afternoons. This was something that she built into the structure of our lives. Fishing. Obviously it made an impact on my life. How you would take 7 children fishing, I don't know. Why you would do that, I don't know, but we did. We went down to the canal bank, the Delaware Raritan Canal, and we would spread out on the bank and we would fish with our bobbers and our worms, and we would fish. It provided structure to the relationship. There was a weekday structure of things that happened. There was a daily structure of things that needed to take place at certain times. There were different assignments of things that happened. My point is, relationships thrive on structure. Structure may not be the word you would give to it, but order, whatever you want. Relationships, although relationships are amorphous, you can't touch them, but they are served by structure, strengthened by that. You pick up a handbook on family today, and eventually at some point in the book they're going to tell you that a family should have a time set aside dedicated for family night, game night, something that provides a structure that brings the family back together. Okay, the point of all that is to say that relationships, the spiritual relationship or relationship of faith, is no different for us as human beings. I mean, the macro structure of our Christian relationship used to be that we found consistency, we found order, we found tangibility in our relationship around the day of Sunday. When I went off to college was the first time on Sundays that I did not attend church because there was nobody there to reinforce that structure, and of course that's what college is about. You're testing which structures will be part of your life and other. And truthfully, when I didn't go to church, I didn't know what day of the week it was. I would get to Thursday, and because Sunday hadn't carried out its anchoring position in my life in terms of the habits of my life, I didn't know it was Thursday anymore. I didn't know what day it was. So these structures provide an orderliness to a relationship. When they work really well, they're not legalistic. They're not, oh, you didn't do that, so now the relationship is over and all the rest of that. But structure. So why should we be surprised then that in the question a lot of people have, which is they want to grow deeper, they want to have more of a substance to this sense of a relationship with God, that the answer to that then becomes some structured pattern of organizing that relationship. In Lent, we look at things like those kinds of structures. We say, what are the steps? What can I do? The metaphor of the step is good because a step is a small incline that you take one at a time, and then there's overall progress that is made as you ascend. That brings me to the 12 steps of AA. What is the foundational one step, first step of a Christian life? It's living with an awareness that you are not an all-powerful human being. That there are vast areas of your life over which you're powerless. And it's not fun always to acknowledge it. And that in those areas, especially if you don't acknowledge that that's beyond the reach of your control and power, and through some discipline you're reminded yourself of those limits, then your whole life turns into chaos because it is unmanageable. And unmanageable in terms of not just beyond your control, but your expectations are shattered. You don't know who you are. Picture an alcoholic who drinks all the time. And the second then step is to remind ourselves that there is a power greater than us in the world that can and wants to restore orderliness and sanity to our lives. But we need to take that conscious step. It's like going fishing every Thursday. It's like going to church. This is a structured foundational block, something on which the relationship is built. It's foundational. And so in Lent, we come back to these foundational steps. What are they? And that is reminding ourselves and living into, sometimes through meditation or prayer, that I believe there is a power greater than myself who can get me back on track. And then the third part, which was made really famous or popular in Christian evangelism, which was really proselytism, getting people to join our Christian club. A point of entry, a statement of general initiation is, I turn my life and my will over to God as I understand God. A willingness to bow my head to the sovereignty of God in my life and not live as if I am God myself. Okay, so I've gone through the first 15 minutes of the chat and only just rehearsed with background what we got to yesterday. Let's move on. And I think 4 is particularly, we're going to do just step number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now you're in Lent. A searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The look-see, the genuine inquiry to ourselves. This is what we pray about during Lent. This is where we need God's help. Because the searching and fearless inventory is not just a casual kind of look-see. It's, God help me. God help me to see in my life what I need to see the things that I can change. To live into the fact that there's a whole bunch I cannot change, and stop fussing and fretting about the things that are beyond my control. And instead, turn those over to God consciously, daily, every minute if necessary, giving it back, giving it away, saying it's not mine, I cannot deal with that, I cannot cope with that, and leaving it over there where God can deal with it, and then turning to the inventory of our own lives. What then are the things that I can be doing? And the wisdom we pray for is the wisdom to know that we've got things in the right pile, that they're sorted into the right pile. I made a decision to turn our will and our lives, this is step 3, over to the care of God as we understood God. And then step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I think these are the places where it's good to have a pencil and paper or a computer to type. And maybe there's time still, so I'll go on to number 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to at least one other human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. There you have it, my friends. There it is, right at the core of the foundation of what works in relationships with God and what works in relationships with other people is a humility to see ourselves, to quest to see ourselves, to know ourselves as we really are, and then to be willing then, in the area where we see our shortcomings, to seek to be clear in the telling of to another person or admitting it to another person, and even asking the other person for help and encouragement in terms of coping with and facing these shortcomings in my life. Admitted to God. That sounds like prayer to me. To ourselves. That sounds like meditation. And to another human being, the exact nature of our wrong. That sounds like confession. The purpose during Lent of depriving ourselves of some of the creature comforts of regular foods we eat or drinks that we have or pleasures that come to us in our lives is to sharpen our awareness, to literally bring into focus a scene, a view of ourselves that might be out of focus. It's really hard to sort things out when they're out of focus, when the focus is not clear. And in our knowledge of human beings, in the structure of relationships, just like I was talking about, there are things that structure all kinds of relationships that make them work. That one of the structures in relationships is this activity of doing the inward, honest confession, conversation, and then having that out, sharing it with God. No one else listening, God, and then making sure you were listening when you were sharing it with God. And then the scariest of all, this is what makes the 12-step groups work, is that you can do all that, and that structure, all that structure doesn't really take on much substance until there's another heartbeat, brain, breath, human being who now hears you, listens to you, and can make it real, can make your humility, your humbleness, make it real. There is an awful lot, a pile of recovered alcoholics who've, that's it, I've given up drinking, I'm not going to overdrink anymore on Monday. And by Wednesday, it's all gone. Because the inventory that started to take place always stayed within the person. That's why, the encouragement always to a person who has compulsive behavior is to tell somebody else about it. Get outside yourself. And that goes right back to step one, acknowledging that there are roles for others to play in your life. There are roles that others need to play in your life. Other people and the other, the great other. God, who is the great other. You are fashioned to be walking in relationship to God. And the move to try to take care of and deal with the relationships in your life, excluding God and not sharing with others, is basically, in the language of theology, that's the heresy of pretending that you are God, making yourself the center of your life, and believing that your perceptions of yourself are perfectly fine, and you don't need to compare your ideas of yourself with somebody else. One of the interventions that we tried to help when we did recovery ministries, worked with a lot of spouses of alcoholic husbands, unfortunately. And one of the things we found was that these men would go out, on their way home from work, they'd stop at the bar, they'd get drunk, and get involved in all kinds of behavior in their alcoholic frenzy. And they would come home after all the family had gone to bed, and when the wife would get up in the morning, if he tripped over something and knocked it or broke something, she cleaned up the glass and all the rest of it. And one of the things we tried to encourage these spouses to do is to say, stop covering over the evidence of that person being out of control. And one person in particular, the husband came home late at night, he was drunk, he was driving drunk. He tried to park the car in the driveway and missed, and ended up with the car sitting in the front lawn. And then when he came inside, he got sick and, all over the kitchen. And so in that particular time, she was working with trying to do her own 12-step part of recognizing there's some things out of her control, him, and leave the evidence where it was. And so it was awful that morning when she got up. She had to restrain herself entirely from cleaning up the mess of his vomit all over the kitchen. And ordinarily what she would have done is she would have gone out into the yard and moved the car back into the driveway so the neighbors would never be able to see what he had done. And her Al-Anon group supported her in her ability to say to God and to the world, I will try to manage the things I can control, but I cannot control that, and so I've got to stop pretending that. And she drew on the women who were part of her Al-Anon group to say, this is how your recovery begins. You have to have some integrity. You cannot be spending your whole life using your life to cover up the things that are happening from him. Now that's a very alcohol and spouse of alcohol related story, but my friends, at the heart of that is the Christian discipline. It is the Christian discipline. So, it's Lent. The topics are, who are we? What do we want to do? And for this week, we're talking about how we can structure a relationship with God through steps, through a regular kind of structure, like all relationships need, some structure that says, here's what makes the substance of my relationship to God real. I hope it's helpful to you. I hope it fits somewhere with what you're struggling with maybe in your life today. Maybe it's an answer to what you might have said, or a response to what you might have said if I've said, so how are you doing in this life today? If nothing else, maybe it'll be challenging you to think about Lent and what you're doing in particular, during a particular season, Lent, 40 days, to try to renew, dust off, and re-energize a relationship. Maybe with God, and maybe also with others. Okay, my friends, to me the time shot by like a rocket today. I hope it's been helpful to you, and I will see you tomorrow on Thursday for another Pastor's Chat. God bless you.